Hi there, so I'm going to talk to you about how to do a 750 word expanded definition, which feels like kind of a weird assignment, but it's actually a pretty interesting exercise in really understanding the terms of your field and being able to explain it to people who are maybe not in your field. And also just knowing that you can speak to other people in your profession and everybody's kind of on the same page with where these terms come from and what they actually mean. So let me pull the assignment up, and here's the whole thing. Let me fly it in real quick. All right, here we go. So how to write the expanded definition? Well, to start with, every field has this jargon, has this language that other people who are not in the field really don't understand and don't get. If you've ever been around doctors, you know what I'm talking about, right? So for this assignment, your team's going to come up with some terms that are important in the topic or area that you're working with. And this could be really interesting, especially for people who don't know much about that topic and want to, really try to figure out what all these terms are all about. I'm looking at you, VPN team. So you come up with some terms. Everybody takes a term, and then everybody individually does this 750 to 1,000 word expanded definition. So the things that are in it. First of all, you're going to look at the history of the word, where the term came from, how it's used over time. Second, you're going to look at different ways that it's used with different audiences and in different genres, so that you can kind of get a feel for how it's used in a professional setting or how it's used in a non-professional setting, and talk about those things. Then you're going to practice defining the term for two audiences. One is for a non-technical audience, and one is for somebody in the field. And then finally you talk about sort of what you learned from doing all this, what was interesting, what was surprising, what implications it might have for how your team uses the technical report. So I'm going to go over the specifics of it here, and then I'll do one quickly, a term from the field that I'm in. So here's a template for it, a model for it. Again, you put this up as a Word doc, but you do the memo header on the top. And then, yes, you can use these as subheads, not the numbers of words, but introduction as a subhead. Okay. So in this 100 to 150 word introduction, you just say what term it is you're investigating, why you chose that term. Then you give a definition of how it's used, the term in your field, and then give its etymology and a little bit of its history, and explain where you look for the term in other definitions. Not other definitions, but other genres, again, other contexts. So that's the introduction, fairly short. And the context is when you really start to investigate what those terms are and how they're connected to audiences, how they're explained to different audiences. So you'll find three sources, and they can be anything. It can be a blog, it can be a professional journal, it can be an academic, peer-reviewed article. I don't care. I don't much care. Magazine or newspaper article. Just where that word is used, and then you're going to say, okay, do a little introduction for this section, and then source one, what the source is. This is an article titled blah, blah, blah. And then quote a sentence from that article or that thing to show how that word is used in that particular genre, that particular setting, that particular article. Okay, and then cite it using APA, which means you got your quote, and then you got parenthesis, and then the page number or the date or whatever, depending on what the source is. And go to the Purdue OWL to look up exactly how to do that sort of thing, okay? So you do that with all three of them. I'll then discuss what it means in that context into that audience. So what your source is, quote, pull a sentence from that source, and then explain how it's used in that sentence, in that context, and for that audience, how it addresses that audience. So you do it for three different sources. And again, you can use academic journal, a magazine article, a blog, social media. Doesn't really matter, okay? It's just whenever you can find something interesting you think would help to understand or explain that term a little bit. Okay? And then after you do that section, which is the bigger one, then you do a little audience practice. You just write out two definitions. One, they shouldn't be more than a sentence or two. And then one is for a low or no tech person, and the second is for a professional in your field. So again, this gives you some practice writing for the two different audiences that your team is going to be writing to. The technical stuff for professional in your field, and then the no or low tech stuff for potential clients and anybody else who kind of stumbles onto it. Then the conclusion is fairly short, a few sentences about what you noticed when you did this. What kind of surprised you? What jumped out at you? What did you think about the different uses? How it was addressed in these different contexts? Did the meaning change when it went to different contexts? You know, if you're the technical person and you see a low-tech definition or use of it, did they really change up what that term means? Right. So it'll be an interesting thing to look at. And then how do you think this might affect what your team is doing? And at the bottom, an APA formatted list of your 3 sources. Okay. So that's it. That's pretty simple. Again, it feels a little strange, but just think about, here's the term and its history. Here are 3 contexts, different places where it's used, and how it addresses the audience at each one of those contexts. And then you practice writing a definition. Okay, so you make this up. This is you getting creative. 2 short little definitions, and then talk about, just in general, what you learned from doing this. So having said that, I'm going to fly this out and just pick something at random that is from one of my fields. And I'm going to go to, I got a tab open here, Google, and I'm going to look up a term called grip. Yeah, grip, G-R-I-P, grip. In the film world, a grip is a specific term. It's part of our jargon. You know, like Klieg lights and, you know, babies and that kind of stuff. Gaffers. Okay, so what is the etymology of the word grip? Grip. Okay, so now I get all this stuff. This is, by the way, a great source, Etymology Online. Okay, this will tell you pretty much everything you need to know about etymologies right there. Okay, it comes from Old English, gripum. Most of my students just sort of copy-paste this into this assignment, which is fine. Be sure it's formatted correctly and it's not just some big weird font in the middle of your own definition. Right? But this is, you know, this is where it came from Old English, past tense from West Germanic. So it's Old English and West Germanic, to seize, okay, to grip, to seize, to obtain. Okay, well, grip, you know, grip, like when we hang on to something, grip. All right, so how is it used? So there's your etymology. So here's a little bit of history. For your term, you may have to go a little bit farther afield. Some of the other words I was looking up, like rhetoric, I had to look up rhetoric, and the history of rhetoric, of using the term rhetoric, goes back to 3000 BC. So it's, you know, it's a long history, so you may have to break it down a little bit. More contemporary technical terms, the history of when it was first used, and that's actually kind of what you're looking for, is going to be shorter. Okay, just by virtue of the fact that a lot of these technical terms have sort of been made up. I mean, network has been around a long time. I know I wrote a excuse me, a video. I wrote a script for an educational video that was. The project was called Math Illuminated, and I got, one of the scripts I wrote was about networks, and it was really fascinating to read about networks and all different kinds of forms and versions and variations. And the word's been around a long time. So here's the history of it. So this would be like the first time it was, we know that it was used, written down, that we can actually trace it back to. Excuse me. Back to 1200, the act of grasping or seizing, fusion of these things. See, grip, a handful. Figurative use, meaning a handshake. You know, it's got a good grip, right? It's from 1785, meaning that which by which anything is grasped is from 1867, and then meaning stagehand is from 1888, with their work shifting scenery. So this is when it was first used in my field. Okay, people, stagehands in the theater, shifting scenery. Okay, so here's a little bit of the history. Here's a little etymology. So now let's see if I can go find some articles about the word grip. Okay, so here's definitions. This is all about sensitivity of language. This is really kind of interesting because this has to do with grip force. And here's study.com. There was one I found yesterday about grip. So I did find one, and if I can't find it now, what is a grip? Let me see if I can find it because it popped up on my Google yesterday. What is a grip in the filmmaking industry? Okay, so that's what I'm looking for, right? All kinds of pictures. They're technicians in filmmaking. They constitute their own department. So here's some articles about it. So what is a grip on a movie set? So this gives us a definition of what grips are. Film 101. This is masterclass.com. This is very a professional group. So is Studio Binder. This one too. Let's see. What the heck is a grip and what do they do? So again, any film wholesale is independent film. I actually found, if I could find this article again, women grips in the film industry. There we go. So this was an article that I found yesterday. I wanted to show you because this one really is, this is the kind of thing I would put in this expanded definition. Talks about women as grips, and it also in this article it also talks about, what is a grip and what do they do. So, and women as grips, and there are very few women as grips because it's a heavy lifting job. They pick up stuff. They pick up cables and boxes and all kinds of things. They mount cameras on the cars, cranes on the building. They do all kinds of stuff, and they're always kind of beat up. So there's very few women in the industry. So this would be a great article that I would use in this thing, right? So this is an examination of one person, and then some of these other ones that I had about grips. What is a grip? It's master. Okay. So this one talks about what all the different kinds of grips are. And so this one was for people in the business. What's a grip? What do grips do? There's camera department grips, there's electrical department grips, and actually, if you go to Wikipedia, oops, that's not what I meant. Okay. I'm just cruising around. This is exactly the kind of thing that you would be doing yourself. So, grip, job, aha, here we go. So, again, this will give me a good basic, look at what the word means because there are lots of different kinds of grips, right? Here's some of the terms that grips, this is the jargon in the field of grips, right? Flags and gobos and grip heads and sandbags. This is the different kinds of grips. So all of this, is really good and useful information for your technical thing. If you're talking about, you'd have to know what a dolly is. And it's a best boy grip. Best boy is an unfortunately gender-based term for people who are second in command in the different departments of a film set. So that's, sort of how you can look at it. Now my definitions would be, if I go back to my little assignment, my audience practice, a definition for a no-take person. A grip is somebody who hauls things around. Okay, that's simple. For somebody in the field, it might be more complicated saying, defining what kind of grip, you're talking about is important for hiring and promotion jobs, because key grips and dolly grips do completely different things, and so the definition would be a little bit more complicated. But because people who are in the industry already know kind of what a grip is, so then I might decide, well, I need to differentiate between the types of grips for somebody coming into the business. So my conclusion, what I learned about, well, the interesting thing that I learned is when I started looking for articles, I realized, and I had a sense of this because I've been in the business off and on for a long time, is that there were very few women grips. I think I only ran into maybe a half dozen in my whole career. Was finding out just exactly how few women grips there are. And so that was a real kind of surprise. So if I was doing a report about, grips in Hollywood, I would definitely make sure that information gets in my report and becomes part of my proposal. Might even change up how I approach the proposal and say, look, let's pitch, let's pitch this profession as something that more than just guys can do. Right? So that's how I would do this. All right, so I had my etymology, the first time it was used, history, these 3 different contexts, just a list of what GRIPs are, women in the business. I can't remember what the third one I looked up. Oh, the master class, trying to, and the audience for the master class site is people who are trying to break into the industry. So it's sort of an introduction to what it means to be a GRIP and to be in that world. The one about women was New York Times. So that was for a general audience of educated urban readers. And then the other one with the list of them, that was off of I think it was like Studio Binder, and again it was more professional, but it was simply an internal industry document, and for anybody who's already in the industry and wants to know more. So there you go. There's my extended definition. Now the rules on writing this thing are has to be at least 750 words, but don't go beyond 1,000. Again, it's an exercise in writing short, because bosses are have a very short attention span, so you need to write for them, and know who that audience is. So audience gets involved in several ways in this. There's the audience you're writing to, and you're writing this memo to a busy boss or executive. There are the audiences that use the term, or the audiences that need to know about the term. So play with this. If you have some problems, again, text me on Slack, and I can't remember what day it's due, but it's due at some point. Okay. Again, have fun with it. Let me know if you have any problems.